Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session. In this session, we'll talk about how might we ensure digital financial inclusion during disasters and humanitarian crisis. I'm your moderator for this session. My name is Kuldeep. I'm from Nepal. I've been working with BRAC Bangladesh for the past 3 years at the Social Innovation Lab, and I'm the Technology for Development Specialist there. I'm also a fellow at the Ethereum Foundation, and I also have some background in humanitarian innovation space, specifically focusing on the topic we're talking about here on disasters and humanitarian crisis, and specifically on cash and commodity transfers. Now, I'll just start with a quick context, and before introducing our guest, the humanitarian sector is actively testing, piloting, and implementing various aid assistance models to ensure faster and smoother distribution of financial support, or commodity support to the beneficiaries in conflict zones and disaster areas. And as the aid model has evolved, cash has come out to be as a prominent means of aid transfer. In recent years, the use of cash transfer programming in humanitarian assistance has grown significantly. And also, there are some evidences that suggest that cash transfers are more efficient and effective than other forms of aid. However, on the other side, the commodity transfer programming was also going through its own changes. The voucher shift system that was manual shifted to an e-voucher system, and the conditionality that was one of the issues with the commodity transfers shifted from being a fully conditional to now partly conditional, and some of the programs are now also fully unconditional as well. This combination of conditionality and the mixture of either cash and a commodity is making this programming the most exciting and innovative sector in the humanitarian response space. And because food is at the center, the non-food assistance are at the center of any disaster response, they also have a huge inclusion element to them. And in this panel discussion, we will engage with two speakers who are working in the front lines of the humanitarian aid assistance. Both work with platforms that use the frontier technology, the blockchain technology, and however, these technologies and solutions have been built from the decades of old learnings of the overall aid assistance program. So they're standing on shoulder of giants and then marching their way ahead. We will discuss what their viewpoints are on digital financial services and what roles they are planning to play in the financial inclusion space. We also understand that this is a space in the development. We're in the mix of what we call a humanitarian development nexus. And a lot of things are still unclear, but at the center, both the solutions are focusing on building platforms for the most marginalized and the hard to reach. I'd like to first introduce to Singh. Rumee is the co-founder of Rahat. Rahat is also a UNICEF Innovation Fund portfolio startup, and it's an open source blockchain-based cash and voucher assistance program to strengthen the financial inclusion, and it's based in Nepal. And Rumee has also founded many other startups. He founded Hamro Life Bank and Kotha for Nepal, and doing many other things. Jessica, our other panelist, is an accomplished leader, coordinator, and an engineer. I've had the privilege of actually working with her for some time back in Nepal, and she has a background in engineering, project management, and international development. She was involved in the reconstruction efforts post-Nepal earthquake in 2015, and she's currently working at the World Food Program as a project manager in the emerging technologies for the building blocks. So, because we're just two additional speakers, I'd like to give some time to both the speakers to, if you want to share any additional thing about you and your solution, just a couple of minutes. Jessica, over to you.
Sure. Hi. Thanks, Kuldeep, and hi, everybody. Very nice to be introduced. Nice to be here to talk to you. Yeah. So just quickly building on what Kuldeep already said. So I'm a project manager working on Building Blocks, which is a blockchain-based humanitarian coordination network. It's the biggest blockchain-based delivery of aid in the world. We currently support around 1 million beneficiaries across Bangladesh, mostly, but also Jordan, and we've also worked in Lebanon and other places. So what the platform is as I say, it's for interagency coordination and currently cash assistance. So cash-based programs, as Kuldeep said, are becoming stronger and stronger and a bigger part of everything that happens. And with that comes a lot of blurred mandates between organizations. It's less clear exactly, where what funding is going to what and how it's being used. And so it's also becoming more blurred for the beneficiaries as well. If organizations trying to protect their blurred mandates have proprietary systems with different ways of accessing them, different modes of delivery, and for beneficiaries, it's very confusing and very complex. And so building blocks is a method of bringing together those different proprietary systems and organizations and allowing them to coordinate in a transparent and secure way on blockchain, and allowing beneficiaries to just access everything in one space. So that's maybe in a nutshell building blocks. I'll pass it back to you, Kuldeep.
Yeah, I'll relay it back to Rumee. Over to you.
Hi, I'm Rumee Singh, and as Kuldeep said, I'm the co-founder for Rahat, and Rahat is part of the UNICEF Venture Fund portfolio startup, and we're fairly new compared to building blocks, and I think there's a lot of space in this area to because the demand is really high. So there's definitely been a lot of learnings from us for us from building blocks as well, and with UNICEF Venture Fund, we've been really looking at building this open source blockchain-based cash and voucher assistance platform. So we're, as Kuldeep had mentioned, the space, it's really definitely going towards cash, but we've also got different modalities, and especially in countries like Nepal, where there's a mix, and as we're working towards that aspect. So we're definitely testing out and doing a lot of pilots. And the last year we've again, like we've really focused on small scale pilots to really look at different modalities and how we can build or bridge the financial gap. So we've been working with different partners and vendors in Nepal, and we've worked with or impacted a little over 4,000 beneficiaries, and have tested our applications from rural settings to urban areas to sort of look at the challenges of the infrastructure. So with that, I'll just pass it back to Kuldeep.
Thank you, Rumee. I have the first question. I'll point to you. The session, the forum is all about digital financial services, and we're both here looking at platforms that operate at the fine lines between whether you can't sometimes recognize whether they are a DFS service or an aid assistance platform. How would you classify your solution as would you classify your solution as a DFS solution? I understand there are some circumstances we can't do financial services, but given the option, what would you choose as a primary means of assistance, cash or commodity?
Because I think there's a lot of backing and a lot of research and everything that really points to the value of cash, right? So the autonomy of choice. So definitely, I think from a fundamental standpoint, Rahat is working towards that aspect, and it's definitely, I think we would identify ourselves as that. But again, what I'd mentioned is there's a mix of modalities, and I think as we move towards the transition, it's a lot of modalities that need to be addressed. So even with the pilots or the testing that we've done, and the challenge purely cash transfer projects, like most of our pilots have been a mix of both of these modalities, and I think there's a lot that needs to go just beyond the technicalities that we're working with. There's a lot from a social, cultural aspect that needs to move towards the cash transfer assistance program. So I think the transition is going to be, it's going to take time. So for that, Rahat is sort of working within the mix to say that we can sort of contribute towards that transition. So I think it is a very flexible platform where we have, tokens that are that can be pegged to commodities or to cash or to a mix of both.
Yeah.
And so I think with that aspect, I think it's sort of definitely it would address both of those and all of those different modalities, but is working towards the cash, the financial service aspect that you mentioned.
Yes, I mean that is one of the beauties of a solution, a token-based solution, which allows to work it between those lines. I have a question to Jessica. I mean, World Food Program does one of the largest unconditional commodity transfers in the world. It's definitely has a lot got to do with it's contributed to a lot around providing more agency to the beneficiaries. Building Blocks does both things. One, it does commodities in Bangladesh, it does cash somewhere else. How has the experience been like, and how has your solution evolved over years? And have you explored the use of DFS models to integrate into a solution? How was the experience? And also, I'll add one last question: what is still needed for it?
Yeah, that's a lot of questions, Kuldeep. So I will do my best to talk through them. If I miss one, let me know at the end. I think, I think the first thing is, so our biggest scale program is currently in Bangladesh. And it's not, in fact, a commodity transfer at all. It's a value voucher, let's say. So it's not cash, because I would just, to build on what Rumee was saying, we need to look at these different modalities because the reality on the ground is more complex than just, good or bad, black or white. And there are lots of contexts where cash may not be the best option for the community in question. If markets aren't functioning, post-disaster, for example, or if, people aren't able to access traditional banking because of their status in a country, then all of this can make it difficult to access actual cash. And also, we also find, for example, working with women in Jordan, giving somebody a sort of a large pile of cash is also, a risk to them as an individual. And so you need to have cash programs where they can access cash in small parts, or where they don't get cash, they know that they're going to get the thing that is essential to them. And for World Food Program, there are many cases where food is essential. So the flexibility to not be able to spend it easily on something else is actually what's desired by the beneficiaries. But ultimately, I agree with Rumee, like cash, it's cash, the way forward, really, or at least giving a cash-like experience. And so that's what we try to do in constrained environments through Building Blocks, is to give the beneficiaries a cash-like experience where they are able to choose what they do with the value that they have been assigned within the constraints of the environment. But they're not just given a commodity and told that's it. Somebody else has decided for you that's what you need. And I think that's it. It's that dignity and it's that flexibility and choice that is so essential with cash and with cash-like options that can come through these sorts of systems. Having said that, I think one of your questions was sort of how have things evolved? And so I think, again, these situations are complex and they change over time. And then you have things like pandemics that come in and, overnight, you don't want to use biometrics anymore where you have to touch, where you have hundreds of thousands of people all touching the same thing. So you have to introduce another method of checking who's in front of you and who should be accessing this account. And so there's evolution changes, but also thinking, okay, actually, this could be better if we steered it in this direction. So I think technology grows, technology improves. You can do today things you couldn't do yesterday, but also the lives of the people that we're serving change, especially, again, if there's a major disaster or if, they're in a long, protracted situation, still their lives are changing. And so their needs are changing and systems need to update to match them. And then I think you asked sort of what's next as well.
Needed.
Sorry, it's still needed. Yes, exactly. So I think then what's next is there's so much more. I mean, I think one of the essential pieces for digital in general, not just financial inclusion, but digital, is we need to get more efficient. There's more and more people in need, and there's less and less money to go around. So we've got to be effective and efficient with that. And digital is such a powerful tool to really make things transparent and to what we use the interagency coordination on the blockchain for is to deduplicate before the support goes out to people. So major agencies and small agencies can look and say, okay, no, somebody's already helping that household this month. I don't need to, so that we don't have gaps and overlaps. We spread out the available support. So it's that kind of making sure that what little there is to go around really gets to go around and it can be visibly seen. I think then for financial inclusion, it's looking at these systems may need to operate in a certain way with a certain modality, as I said, because of the current constraints. But we should always be looking at the long-term solution, and people should be, getting better access to financial inclusion in the long term. So how can our systems that they need in an emergency or they need in a humanitarian context, how can that help them on that sort of digital inclusion journey? And I think one of the key things there about financial service providers is that, for example, with building blocks, you can coordinate and all decide, okay, so who's helping who and how does that work? That's all done collaboratively. But then agencies can choose financial service providers and link automatically to them to actually do a cash distribution or actually do another kind of service, but still bringing together that coordination for that efficiency gain. But making sure that if markets are functioning and financial service providers are there, they should always be the thing that's used. Other systems are there when they have to be because there's a gap to fill that's not being covered by traditional systems. And I'll stop there. Some of your questions.
I agree. I think when in disasters, I've seen in the earthquake response in 2015, some of the organizations had boxes of cash, transferring all across like a 4-hour, 5-hour journey, and taking it and then giving people, cash in where they didn't know where to put in because they didn't even have homes. Because their homes got destroyed because of the earthquake. So they had a lot of pile of cash and didn't know where to go. And you raised a very important point about having the ability to access cash in an intermittent manner, so that you can take out a little bit and then use a little bit more. And that is where I think also the value of commodity transfer also comes in. So we can't just, as I said, we can't just say full cash, but there are nuances where, especially when local infrastructure is damaged, you cannot just straight away go into cash. I agree. Really good insight, Jessica. And also, we'll touch about the inclusion and kickstart, how disasters are somehow kickstarting financial inclusion. We'll talk about those things later on. In terms of going into the design principles again, a question to Rumee. While you were designing and iterating your platforms, do you have to provide additional? Did you provide additional design consideration to make it more inclusive for females and other marginalized clients? Or we at BRAC mostly say that whenever we design something for the general audience, almost inevitably these are designed for men. Ultimately, they become more feasible for men than the other genders. What are the considerations that you've taken to make it more specifically more accessible for female clients, let's say?
I think for us, because it's been definitely an iterative process for us as we've been building this out and as we've been testing this out and bringing it back and making changes accordingly. Because Rahat is basically we're looking at the unbanked, right? So just before going to the gender aspect, looking at the marginalized, right? So when you're looking at the unbanked, so the whole idea of them having access, being able to access, or as Jessica and you had mentioned, being able to decide how much they want to spend or what they want to spend on. So having the ability to just have control over their finances. I think that's been one of what we had started off with looking into, to see that, okay, for the unbanked, then without having to go to a specific bank or to walk days to get access to cash, that's something they'd be able to use it within their local economy. So that was one that we'd really been focusing on. From the gender aspect, more than the platform, I think we've been looking at also from an onboarding standpoint for beneficiaries, how could we engage them, right? So what is the even from a financial literacy standpoint or a digital literacy standpoint, like, are women at a lower, do they have lower access to that? So how do we look at onboarding, and how do we look at beneficiary engagement at this aspect? Like, can we build in engagement tools, or can we build in like engagement ability to see if we can get them onboarded faster so that they have access to that? So I think these are some aspects that we've been looking in. And just as a quick, like an example, we'd worked in rural Nepal with women in maternity. So we'd worked at, I think, like the collaboration and being able to engage with the local partners is very key. So we'd worked with like the district hospital and figuring out like, what they need to be able to, like, how can we get them on board into the system, and what are the aspects they would need. So for even as like we started working on like some NFT tokens for us, and even introducing some like a nutrition token specifically for the maternity, women in maternity, was that sort of made a lot of like, even it was a very tiny change into the platform, but I think that gave in a lot of value as for us to sort of think along those lines. So I think these are just like some examples as to what we try to bring into the thought process, but really focusing on the onboarding of the beneficiaries was very key for us.
Thanks, Rumee. Jessica, in terms of, in terms of you're part of the design team at Building Blocks. How, what's your experience been with, especially in the Cox's Bazar response? What are the specific gender considerations have you made in the development of the platform?
Yeah, thanks, Kuldeep. So I think what's interesting for us a little bit, particularly for the, for all of our contexts, actually, I'm just thinking the beneficiaries themselves are not using the technology. So this is because of the constrained environments that we work in. Ideally, everything should be in the hands of the beneficiaries. They should be in charge of their data, in charge of their access, and in charge of everything. But that requires them to have some level of technology and internet access in their hands. And that just isn't the case for people constrained for different reasons. So because that's the case, so the systems are being operated on their behalf, let's say, so either by program staff or by retailers or by, so people who run shops and are sort of, in our case, supporting beneficiaries to redeem something in their shop in the slums in Dhaka, for example. So the technology itself is being used by a third party, let's say. So from that point of view, when you're talking about sort of design, one aspect of it is sort of how do people use it and so on and so forth. I think that doesn't really address the gender aspect in terms of the beneficiaries or other marginalized groups. I think for me, it's much more about the programmatic questions, or about how do we best serve these marginalized groups with the program, and how does the technology facilitate that? So, for example, through Building Blocks, we have core value that goes out to everybody who's entitled in the operation. But then there's additional top-ups for those who are identified as vulnerable, and they can be targeted on specific commodities, as you say, or they can be completely free to spend them, whatever's available. And these things can be sort of tailored to target nutritional outcomes. They can help certain groups. All of that is possible, but I think as far as possible, the design of the system, let's say, isn't necessarily what's going to impact the marginalized groups at the end. It's a collaboration and partnership between how is the humanitarian aspect of this going to make lives better, and then how does the technology underpin that and strengthen it, and definitely not limit it or make it worse in any way. But I think there is that, just from a design point of view, there is that layer of kind of, this isn't something that most of our beneficiaries get to hold in their hand and use themselves, yet we would love that to be the future.
Yeah, and I think this is where the user journey comes into play, where both the program design people as well as the technology platform providers have to work together to make sure that the user journey becomes as smooth as possible, and then provide as much as agency to the people as they can. especially with especially in places in disasters and other refugee responses. Female survivors are already stripped of their agency a lot, and technology like yours and Rahat can bring that back, and it is very important. I'd like to go then a little bit into the questions around how to give a specific example of how you've integrated an external payment gateway system or a mobile money system into your platform. Jessica, I know that your building blocks has done some of that um, in the in the slums in Dhaka. How successful has it been? And you mentioned about nudging and behavioral changes, focus in getting people into nutrition. What were the outcomes? Can you share us a little bit about it?
Yeah. So yeah, as you say, like it's how everything works together. But just to take the example of Dhaka, so the concept there is that WFP is supporting households in the urban areas with financial support. That financial support comes as a cash payment through a mobile money provider, which the beneficiaries are then free to do with what they wish. So unconditional cash, where there's functioning markets and functioning financial service providers that they can access without needing to be in formal banking. Great. But we also want to, help to encourage certain outcomes with the money that we provide to these households. That is the nature of, donors and humanitarian organizations. So what we do is a behavioral change and incentive program. So they can do what they like with the cash that they receive, but if they choose to come to shops within the slums who are working together with us, use building blocks to record their transactions around which fresh food and different healthy options that they've purchased with their money, then looking at that, WFP can deliver an incentive, i.e., a little bit more cash the next month. So it's not compulsory, but it certainly helps to encourage, but only if it's spent on certain foods. And so this has been the program, and it's been really successful over it continues today. And it's just it's interesting to see how many of the beneficiaries do choose to be part of the program and spend their money on healthy foods, and therefore also just to access awareness information and other pieces that can then come in programmatically. And all of that is simply tracked through the building blocks and the blockchain system. But the actual financial transfers in that case are not. So that's done directly to the financial service provider from WFP. But it's possible in the future. So what we've done elsewhere is, as I say, where many organizations, for example, in Lebanon, after the Beirut blast, many organizations wanted to give cash assistance, multi-purpose cash assistance, but they didn't want to overlap with each other because there wasn't enough funding to go around everybody. So they used building blocks to coordinate, and then they took the results as to which accounts each organization should support, and they did those financial transactions in that case through Western Union mostly, because that was the main functioning large-scale service provider in the country. So what we would look to do in the future is where there's long-term emergency responses, let's say, rather than maybe short-term, is to look to really closely digitally integrate with those service providers so that the manual steps that there still are today, by the nature of there being very many financial service providers in the world, the ones that we are working with long-term to integrate so that everything can be automated. Again, further efficiencies to integrate those financial service providers, but also to integrate with multiple service providers so that, again, beneficiaries have the most choice and the most flexibility and the most freedom to do what they want with what they are entitled to.
Yes, brilliant. That is one of the reasons why I say this space is one of the most exciting and innovative programming in the whole overall humanitarian response around the world. There's so much of things we can do and so much of flexibility that these platforms provide. A question to Rumee, as Rahat grows and builds more use cases, what instance has stood out for you where you felt that Rahat has the most potential, like going ahead in the future?
I think the building blocks of blockchain is with transparency and bringing in that accountability. So that's definitely something that we think as we grow that will keep on adding more value to it. And in addition to that, we've because as you said, like, this space is a lot of collaborations, a lot of different, as Jessica had mentioned, multiple financial service providers, multiple partners, multiple collaborators. So we're really looking into how we can integrate from a system standpoint as well, like to see how we could integrate with different kind of tools as well. So make it more flexible and accessible, and for different kind of agencies or different stakeholders to come in and collaborate. So that's definitely something that we've been looking at. And just as an example, one aspect that we're also trying to see is also looking into the humanitarian aid field on forecast-based financing, to see how we could bring in, the smart contract aspect to it, to see how Rahat could sort of add in more value to that and help facilitate the specific forecast-based financing models that have started to come up. So that's definitely something that we've been looking into as well. And I think that's probably some of the spaces that we're sort of trying to see how we could expand.
Yeah, that's a really interesting space. I think that is also now touching into where these disaster aid platforms then become a trigger point for long-term usage of digital and financial services. Jessica, what are the you mentioned this previously as well. Like, what is the limiting factor for for this situation where uh, in times of crisis you use these platforms and they become a triggering point and then a stable point for more financial inclusion and digital financial access?
Sorry, Kuldeep, I didn't quite get the question.
I was saying, what were the limiting barrier? What is going to be the limiting barrier into this, or maybe let's say what is needed again to make sure that once you have these platforms like building blocks and Rahat integrated into the response, these then become foundations for building long-term financial inclusion.
Great. Yeah. So I think, well, there's a number of things spring to mind. First is what we're trying to sort of, one of the things about bringing this sort of coordination element in and bringing different organizations together is that otherwise, for example, in an emergency, the support that someone receives is very siloed into the different sort of arbitrary humanitarian groups. They're getting their food or their shelter or their wash or their, so on. And if we're not careful, that's also different systems, different organizations, different sort of information. And they all just stay where they are when whoever it is returns back home or is able to get back into the sort of functioning markets or banking systems or whatever it is. They lose all of that. So the first one is to bring it together in one place and stop it being so fractured. And then ultimately is trying to find a way to put it in the hands of the beneficiary, so that if they go back, they take that credit history that they've maybe built up, or they take the result is that they've got a bank account, or they've got a credit history that may allow them to get a bank account, or whatever it is. Also, I say, where there's functioning markets and where there's functioning financial service providers, the humanitarian aid, if it's channeling through that, then that by default means that those beneficiaries have got access then to that mobile money or to that bank account or to that whatever it is. And so you leave that behind as maybe the humanitarian response retreats. It's no longer required, but those beneficiaries by definition have access to those longer standing elements. I think it's about designing systems and the programs that look for, well, what's a feasible long-term option, and how do we make sure that things are, yes, not fractured, and ultimately able to be, in a dream world, taken with the person wherever they go, or at least if they're staying where they are, that they, instead of being a separate system for the sake of being some sort of separate humanitarian system, it's much more integrated with whatever is available in that context and in that country. That they will be able to belong to.
Yeah, the value of blockchain comes out when things are integrated yet distributed, right? If you aren't able to integrate multiple different organizations and platforms into this foundational system, it will just be another siloed project that will just remain isolated. It doesn't make any sense unless it's integrated. So I think that is why I think I agree that one of the major barriers is that to be able to bring all of the actors together, even the UN actors have to come together, find a way to act together and set a precedent for the other organizations as well. Now going into the, I mean, we got in our last 4 minutes. Since both of the speakers, both of you have blockchain-based solutions, I'd like to ask my final questions around that. What do you think are it's a very general question. What do you think are the various pros and cons in using blockchain as a foundational technology for the future of aid assistance? And can blockchain play a positive role in inclusion? I'll start with Rumee and maybe Jessica, you can end it.
Sorry. So, I mean, blockchain is definitely redefining the role of the banks, governments, and corporations. So it's enabling financial transactions and making it more secure and cheaper and more efficient. So I feel like there's a lot of pros that could definitely come up from this. And I think, I mean, bringing in greater financial inclusion, because, if you have a phone, everybody's phone could end up being like almost like a digital bank, right? So, or even, with folks without phones, there are certain aspects, as Jessica had mentioned, or aspects that Rahat is also working on with, from QR code based cards, or trying to figure out how best to build that out. There are definitely different options. So I think there's a lot of pros for that. So from a con standpoint, I think there's certain needs are for a blockchain, the infrastructure, or from electricity or internet connectivity and all of these pieces that are required, which could be a challenge in certain crisis situations. So those faced in Nepal, basically has been, bringing in, as you guys had mentioned earlier, bringing in all of these players and bringing in our partners together to work together. And because, the challenges with cryptos, legality issues, and I just wanted to mention that as well, because that's been one of the biggest challenges here in Nepal, all of the awareness issues, or because crypto is banned in Nepal, and the lack of awareness of blockchain versus crypto, it takes a lot of toll on bringing partners on board. So I just sort of digress from your question, Kuldeep, on just the challenges, not just focusing on blockchain, but the adoption of blockchain at our end is also very challenging. So I think it's a big transitionary process, and but it's definitely something that is worth and needs to be needs focus, and it needs more partners to come in.
Right.
I'll pass it
Over to you, Jessica. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Rumee. I mean, I agree very much. I think I would sum it up to say, all technology is great in used in the right way, and we'll get there. The technology will be able to do what we want it to do. For me, it's much more around it's the political aspects, it's the collaboration, the awareness, and sort of allowing an environment where these technologies can really support what it is that we're trying to do, is ultimately, make the lives better of people who are struggling because of major events going on. And so really, the technology is not the blocking point. We can already do a lot, and we'll be able to do more and more all the time. It's the political, social, and kind of surrounding aspects that really are again and again the biggest challenge. So we don't keep working on that, and the technology will see us through.
Yeah, I think both of you made some really important points there. The technology, as Jessica said, will reach there, and in some places it's already there. And what it needs is a more willpower from the policymakers, and also a little bit of more risk-taking mindset from different programming and agencies that are involved in the humanitarian space. There is a lot of potential of a blockchain in this arena. The idea of having to not worry about general reporting and auditing, where everything becomes so transparent and smooth that you don't have to spend time on kind of post programming, but aid goes directly to the beneficiaries through the platforms. This is a huge potential, and I think the general industry and the general sector is going in that direction. And I think as new solutions will be developed, I think most of these solutions will have that underpinning of transparency and accountability that blockchain provides in this space. I would like to. I think we're just 1 minute just extra ahead of the on the time, and I would like to thank both of the speakers for this amazing discussion. You've been very receptive of all the questions that I've asked, and really good conversation. I think we should have more of this, in this forum and beyond this forum as well. Looking forward to having more of these discussions and sharing with all the audience more again. Thank you so much for attending both of you for the session. I think that marks the end. Final thoughts from Rumee and Jessica, or we can end it here.
Just a big thank you, and I'm just excited to see if we could, again, from the collaboration standpoint, I'm so excited to have a connection with Jessica and maybe have more exploratory conversations with her. So thank you, Kuldeep.
Thank you.
Yeah, same as Ellie. The power of blockchain is all about the network effect. So the more people we get on, the more powerful it all is. So great to have a chance to talk. And yeah, if people want to reach out, feel free.
Yeah, that's what FIF is all about. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the audience for sticking with us. I think we should end the session now. Thank you.